Alex first met Mia in college during a freshman orientation event. He was immediately drawn to her, not for her beauty alone, but for her sheer presence. Mia had a way of commanding a room, her laughter cascading like a ripple effect, pulling everyone around her into her orbit. She exuded ambition, talking openly about wanting to make a name for herself, a stark contrast to Alex's reserved, analytical nature. He admired her fearlessness and her dream of being an influencer, a term that was beginning to hold weight at the time. Alex was majoring in engineering and liked to think logically, but Mia disrupted that pattern. She was spontaneous, throwing herself into school activities, organizing protests, and even starting her YouTube channel to chronicle college life. He saw her as a storm, chaotic but irresistibly fascinating. They met officially at a coffee shop near campus. Mia had spilled her latte on her laptop and Alex, ever the fixer, offered to help. That encounter set the stage for a series of study sessions, late-night conversations, and eventually, a relationship. Mia's boldness extended to their relationship. She was the one who proposed they go steady, stating, "We're great together. Why waste time?" Alex couldn't argue with her logic. It was just as charismatic as she was. Their dynamic was complementary. Mia was the dreamer, the doer, while Alex was the planner, the one who brought stability. When they decided to get married during their final year of college, Alex's friends were skeptical. "She's a firecracker," one of them said. "Can you handle that kind of energy forever?" But Alex didn't see Mia as something to handle. He saw her as someone who brought light into his structured world, someone who challenged him to step outside his comfort zone. After they tied the knot, Mia threw herself into her influencer aspirations full-time. She was tireless in her pursuit, pouring hours into editing, filming, and brainstorming content. Alex, despite working long hours as an entry-level engineer, was her biggest cheerleader. He built her a small studio in their apartment, researched lighting setups, and even helped her with her first batch of videos. Mia's rise to influencer fame wasn't immediate. There were nights filled with tears when her videos didn't get the engagement she hoped for or when trolls left cruel comments. Alex would hold her, promising her that success wasn't linear. And then things began to shift. One of her lifestyle vlogs went viral, and suddenly Mia's follower count skyrocketed. Brands started reaching out, offering sponsorships, and within a year, Mia was a name in the industry. The early days of her success were intoxicating. They traveled for brand deals, and Alex loved seeing Mia in her element, commanding attention in ways he never could. Yet, as her fame grew, so did the cracks in their relationship. Mia's schedule became erratic, her focus consumed by her online persona. Alex found himself alone more often than not, his evenings spent eating takeout in their echoingly quiet apartment. Still, Alex supported her. He was proud of what she had built, even if it came at the cost of their time together. He understood her passion, though he couldn't help but feel like he was losing the Mia he fell in love with, the one who laughed freely, without the pressure of an audience. Alex's doubts started creeping in when Mia's influencer life began to dictate their private one. She started filming moments that Alex thought were theirs alone, like their anniversary dinner. He felt like a prop, a supporting actor in the story Mia was crafting for her audience. He confronted her once, asking, "Can we just have this for ourselves?" But Mia brushed it off, saying, "This is us, Alex. Sharing my life is part of who I am now." Despite his reservations, Alex kept quiet. He didn't want to be the one to stifle her dream. He had always been her anchor, her rock, and he didn't want to be the one to clip her wings. Then came the partnerships with male influencers. Mia often collaborated with others in her field, attractive, confident men who shared her outgoing nature. Alex noticed the flirtatious undertones in their videos, the way Mia would laugh a little too hard at their jokes. He told himself it was nothing, that it was just part of the performance. But the seed of doubt had been planted. One day, Alex stumbled upon a DM thread between Mia and one of her collaborators, an up-and-coming fitness influencer named Nate. It wasn't explicitly inappropriate, but the tone was undeniably familiar. When Alex confronted Mia, she dismissed it as professional banter. "It's nothing, Alex. This is how the industry works. You have to be friendly to build connections." Alex wanted to believe her, but the distance between them continued to grow. Mia spent more nights away, claiming work obligations, and Alex started to feel like a ghost in their home. He poured himself into his job, finding solace in the stability of numbers and designs, things that didn't change on a whim. As Mia's fame reached new heights, Alex began to wonder if he had made a mistake in prioritizing her dreams over their relationship. But he couldn't bring himself to let go, clinging to the hope that the woman he fell in love with was still somewhere beneath the layers of fame and followers. Mia's rise to social media stardom was nothing short of extraordinary. The woman I married, the passionate, ambitious whirlwind, had turned her dreams into reality. She had become a name, a brand, someone people looked up to. At first, I couldn't have been prouder. Watching her followers climb from a few thousand to hundreds of thousands was thrilling, almost surreal. Every notification on her phone felt like a victory. But with that success came a shift, subtle at first, but undeniable over time. The transformation began innocently enough. Her day-to-day schedule started to revolve entirely around content creation. Filming, editing, brainstorming. It consumed her. Our shared moments became opportunities for content. If we were out at a restaurant, she'd pause to snap photos of the food. A weekend hike turned into a carefully choreographed shoot with multiple takes to ensure the lighting was perfect. Even quiet mornings in bed were interrupted by her phone's incessant buzz, the demands of her newfound audience never ending. At first, I didn't mind. I loved seeing her passionate, thriving. But it wasn't long before I realized I wasn't a part of this world she was building. Not really. I was the cameraman, the one adjusting the angles, ensuring her best side was captured. I told myself it was temporary, that once she hit her stride, we'd find a way back to each other. But the deeper she went into this life, the further away she seemed. Our apartment, which once felt like a cozy retreat, was now a production studio. Boxes of PR products filled every corner, and lights, cameras, and backdrops cluttered the space. The dining table, once our spot for long conversations over dinner, became her workstation. Even the walls didn't escape. They were painted in neutral tones to match her aesthetic. It felt like I was living in someone else's home, a set designed for an audience I'd never meet. The worst part was how natural it all seemed to her. Mia adapted to her new life effortlessly. She thrived under the spotlight, her charisma translating perfectly through the screen. Brands loved her, followers adored her. But in all that adoration, I started to feel invisible. My jokes didn't land the way they used to. My concerns were brushed off as if they were background noise. And when I tried to talk about how I was feeling, her response was always the same. "This is my dream, Alex. You've always supported me." I had supported her. I still did. But I couldn't ignore the way she was changing. The Mia I fell in love with used to light up a room just by being herself. Now, she was always on, performing for a camera, crafting an image. It was like she had split into two versions of herself, the woman I knew and the persona she showed the world. The lines between them blurred more every day. Her priorities shifted to date nights became rare, and when we did manage to get out, her phone was always on the table, buzzing with notifications. She'd excuse herself mid-conversation to post an update or respond to comments. Sometimes, it felt like I was on a date with her followers rather than my wife. I missed her. I missed the woman who used to laugh with me over nothing, who could spend hours debating the best sci-fi movies, who'd wake me up on lazy Sundays with pancakes and terrible coffee. I missed the woman who used to look at me like I was her entire world, not just a part of it. Things came to a head during our anniversary. I had planned a quiet evening at home, candles, her favorite takeout, a playlist of songs from our college days. I wanted to remind her of who we were before the followers, before the fame. She walked in late, dressed impeccably, her makeup flawless. She looked beautiful, but she wasn't dressed for me. "There's this last-minute brand event," she said, barely glancing at the table I'd set. "I'll just be a couple of hours. You're okay with that, right?" I wasn't. But what could I say? She was already halfway out the door. The dinner sat untouched. I spent the evening scrolling through her social media, watching her post stories from the event. Her laughter echoed through my phone, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. It belonged to them, the followers, the brands, the influencers she was surrounded by. I started to resent the life we'd built. Not her. I could never resent Mia. But this world she was part of, it felt like it had stolen her from me. I began pulling away, retreating into work. If she could immerse herself in her dream, maybe I could find solace in mine. I took on more projects, stayed late at the office, and told myself it was for the best. But the distance between us only grew. I noticed things I didn't want to notice. The way she smiled a little brighter in her photos with other influencers, particularly Nate, the fitness guy she often collaborated with. The way her laughter seemed more genuine in their videos than it did with me. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid. But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. I tried to bring it up once, late at night after a rare dinner together. "Mia," I said, hesitating, "do you ever feel like we're losing us?" She looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we don't talk like we used to. We don't spend time together." She sighed, brushing it off. "We're both busy, Alex. That's just life." But it didn't feel like life. It felt like avoidance. The turning point came when I overheard her on a phone call. She was laughing, her voice light, saying something about how lucky she was to have such a supportive husband who didn't get in the way. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I wasn't in the way, I was supposed to be her partner. I realized then that her world didn't have room for me anymore, not the way it used to. I was an accessory, a silent supporter in the background of her bright, chaotic life. And the more I faded into the background, the more I questioned whether we could ever find our way back to each other. It wasn't just her dream anymore. It was her life. And I was starting to wonder if there was still a place for me in it. I began to notice it in small, almost imperceptible ways at first. Mia would glance at her phone mid-conversation, smiling at messages I wasn't a part of. The sound of her laughter in another room would echo through the apartment, warm and unrestrained, but never because of something I'd said. She had always been vibrant, a magnet for people, but now it felt like she was sharing her energy with someone else entirely. She started spending more time out of the house. At first, it was brand meetings, collaborations, and networking events. Those were legitimate parts of her work, and I understood that. But over time, her outings became less professional and more ambiguous. She'd go to dinners with people I didn't know, come back smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, with stories of new friends I'd never meet. When I asked about them, she brushed me off. "Just some people I met at the event," she'd say. Or, "They're in the industry, great contacts for the future." I wanted to believe her. I told myself it was my own insecurities talking, that she was just building her brand like always. But something about it felt wrong. Mia had always been good at connecting with people, but this felt different. She wasn't just connecting, she was replacing. Our quiet dinners were replaced with her rushing out the door, barely touching the food I made. Movie nights became solo evenings for me while she sent texts and made plans. I found myself staying up late, waiting for her to come home, staring at the muted glow of my laptop without really seeing anything. Her arrival was always the same, a bright smile, an almost theatrical cheerfulness that didn't match the dark circles under her eyes. "Long night?" I asked once, trying to sound casual. She shrugged, kicking off her heels and sinking into the couch. "You could say that. Networking's exhausting." Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at it quickly, the smile on her face faltering for a split second before she swiped the notification away. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Just Nate," she said, her voice light. "We're planning a new collaboration." I didn't push it, but my chest tightened every time his name came up. Nate, the fitness influencer. He was everywhere in her life lately, her stories, her posts, her late-night calls. I told myself it was nothing, that it was just work. But the way she talked about him, the way her face lit up when his name came up, it gnawed at me. The first time I confronted her about it, it didn't go well. "Mia, do you think you're spending a little too much time with Nate?" I asked one evening. She frowned, her expression shifting to something defensive. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I just mean, you're always texting him. And these late nights, It's starting to feel like he's more of a priority than us." She laughed, but it wasn't the warm kind of laugh I knew. It was sharp, cutting. "Alex, don't be ridiculous. He's a friend. A work friend. You know how this industry is." "Do I?" I shot back before I could stop myself. "Because it feels like I'm not part of this industry you keep talking about. Feels like I'm not part of anything these days." Her expression hardened. "You're overthinking this. Seriously, Alex. Don't start acting jealous. It's not a good look." Jealous. I hated that word. It made me feel small, like my concerns weren't valid, like I was being unreasonable. But the pattern continued. More nights out, more missed dinners, more texts from Nate or other industry friends I couldn't put a face to. I tried to keep myself busy, throwing myself into work, taking up hobbies I'd let slide. But it didn't help. The more I tried to fill the silence, the louder my doubts became. The final blow came during a rare evening when we were both home. I suggested we cook together, something we used to love. Mia agreed, but it quickly became clear her heart wasn't in it. Her phone was in her hand more than the spatula, and the conversation felt forced. At one point, I tried to reminisce about our early days, hoping to spark something. "Remember that little cafe where we had our first date?" I said, smiling at the memory. "They still have the best cappuccinos?" She didn't even look up from her phone. Mia?" She sighed, finally setting her phone down. "What, Alex? Do you even want to do this anymore?" I asked, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Do what?" "This," I said, gesturing between us. "Our life." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "You're never here, Mia. And when you are, it's like I'm boring you." She didn't deny it. Instead, she crossed her arms and leaned against the counter. "Alex, you don't get it. My life is fast-paced now. I'm meeting people, making connections, doing things that matter. And you're stuck in the same routine." "Stuck?" I echoed, my chest tightening. "Mia, that routine is what built this life we have. While you're out there chasing followers, I'm holding everything else together." "That's not fair," she snapped. "You knew what you were signing up for when you married me." "I married you, Mia. Not your followers, not Nate, not this version of you that doesn't even see me anymore." She didn't respond. She just grabbed her phone and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there alone. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. Mia wasn't just drifting away, she was actively choosing a life that didn't include me. And no matter how much I wanted to fight for us, I wasn't sure if there was still in us to fight for. It happened on a Wednesday evening, one of those nights where the silence in the apartment felt louder than anything else. Mia was out again, attending what she called networking dinner. I didn't even bother asking for details anymore. Her answers had become rehearsed, vague, and her tone was always the same, a mix of indifference and irritation. I told myself I wouldn't wait up, that I'd let it go and focus on my own life. But something in my gut wouldn't let me. Her laptop was on the counter, left open but in sleep mode. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but as I walked past, the screen lit up, revealing a string of notifications. Messages. My eyes caught a name I didn't recognize, Kian. I told myself not to look, that it wasn't my place. But then I thought about how distant she had been, how little of her life I was a part of anymore. The rationalizations came quickly. If she had nothing to hide, why would it matter? My hand hesitated on the trackpad for only a moment before I clicked. The messages were there in plain sight. At first, it was small talk, innocuous, almost harmless. Kian complimenting her on her latest post, Mia thanking him with a playful emoji. But as I scrolled further, the tone shifted. "Kian, can't stop thinking about the other night. You looked incredible. Mia, you're too sweet. I loved our little getaway. Can't wait for the next one." My chest tightened. I stared at the words, my brain scrambling to make sense of them. Getaway? What getaway? I scrolled further, my hands trembling as I read message after message, each one more damning than the last. They talked about meetings in hotels, shared inside jokes I didn't understand, and exchanged photos. Nothing explicit, but intimate enough to make my stomach churn. This wasn't just flirting. This was a full-blown affair. My heart was pounding as I navigated to another chat, this one with one of her friends, a woman named Emily. I remembered Mia mentioning her once, a fellow influencer she collaborated with occasionally. Their conversation confirmed everything. Emily, you're playing a dangerous game, Mia. What about Alex? Mia, Alex doesn't have a clue. He's too busy being boring to notice. Emily, still, you should be careful. Kian isn't exactly discreet. Mia, relax. I've got it under control. Alex is too predictable to ever suspect anything. The words hit me like a physical blow. Boring. Predictable. As if I were some placeholder in her life, someone she kept around for stability while she chased her whims. My mind raced, replaying every late night, every excuse, every moment I doubted myself. She hadn't just betrayed me physically, she'd mocked me, reduced me to a joke in conversations with her friends. I felt sick. The room seemed to tilt, and I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. My instincts told me to confront her right then and there, to call her and demand answers. But I stopped myself. I needed more. I opened her email. The inbox was flooded with brand offers, collaborations, and event invites. But buried among them were confirmations for hotel reservations, ones I knew I hadn't been part of. The dates lined up perfectly with the nights she claimed to be working lates or attending events. My breath caught when I found photos in a folder labeled personal. They were of her and Kian, taken in places I didn't recognize. A beach. A rooftop bar. The intimacy in their smiles, the way they stood close, her head resting on his shoulder, it was unmistakable. I sat down, my hands shaking as I closed the laptop. I felt numb, as if my body had shut down to protect me from the full weight of what I'd just uncovered. This was it. The proof. The undeniable confirmation that Mia, the woman I had loved, supported, and sacrificed for, had chosen someone else. Hours passed before I heard her key in the door. I didn't move from the couch. She walked in, her heels clicking against the floor, her face lighting up in a practiced smile. "Hey," she said casually, setting her purse down. "Long day?" I didn't respond. She looked over at me, her smile faltering. "Alex? What's wrong?" I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who's Kian?" The color drained from her face. Her confident demeanor cracked for the first time in months, and she froze, her hand halfway to the fridge. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice shaky. "Don't lie to me, Mia," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I saw the messages. I saw the photos." "I know." Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, might try to talk her way out of it. But then she sighed, her shoulders slumping as she leaned against the counter. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kian, it was just supposed to be fun." "Something different?" "Different?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What does that even mean, Mia? We're married. I gave everything to support you, to build this life with you, and you just, what? Threw it away for fun." She looked at me, her eyes glassy. "You don't understand, Alex. My life is so different now. The people, the opportunities. You wouldn't get it? Because I'm boring, right?" I snapped, the words cutting through the air like a knife. Her silence was answer enough. The anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it all came crashing down at once. I couldn't look at her, couldn't be in the same room. I grabbed my keys and left, the door slamming behind me as I stepped into the night. I drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring through my tears. I thought about everything, our first date, our wedding day, the nights we stayed up talking about our dreams. It felt like all of it had been erased, replaced by lies and betrayal. By the time I returned home, the apartment was dark. Mia was in the bedroom, the door closed. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where we used to sit together. I didn't know what came next. All I knew was that the life we'd built was gone, shattered by the choices she'd made. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure if we could ever put the pieces back together. The next morning, the reality of what I had uncovered hit me like a freight train. My chest felt hollow, and my mind replayed every damning message and photograph I'd seen. I hadn't slept a minute. Mia's betrayal consumed me, every detail cutting deeper. I had thought that if I ever faced something like this, I'd break down. But instead, I felt a cold clarity settle over me. By the time she emerged from the bedroom, I was seated at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee as if it held the answers. Mia stopped in her tracks when she saw me. She looked hesitant, like someone walking into a courtroom unsure of their defense. "Morning," she said tentatively. I didn't respond. My eyes met hers, and whatever pretense she'd been hoping for vanished. She sighed, rubbing her temples as she sat across from me. "Alex, can we—" "No," I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. "There's nothing to talk about, Mia. I've made my decision." Her expression shifted from guilt to confusion. "What decision?" "I want you to leave," I said bluntly. "Today. Take your things and go." She blinked, as if she hadn't expected me to be so direct. "You're kicking me out?" "You betrayed me, Mia," I said, the words heavy but firm. "You lied, you cheated, and you made a mockery of our marriage. You don't get to stay here and pretend everything's fine." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms defensively. "This is my home too, Alex. You can't just throw me out." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Your home? Mia, you've been living in hotels and other people's arms more than you've been here. This place stopped being your home the moment you chose someone else over me." Her face flushed with anger now, the guilt receding as she bristled at my words. "You don't understand what my life is like. I've worked so hard to build this career, to create something for myself, and all you've done is hold me back." "Hold you back?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I supported you, Mia. I built you a damn studio in this apartment. I stayed up late helping you edit videos, encouraged you when you wanted to quit, and stood by you through everything. And this is how you repay me." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I've already contacted a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce." Her eyes widened, the anger replaced by a flicker of panic. "Divorce? Alex, come on, don't you think that's a bit extreme?" "Extreme?" I said, incredulous. "Mia, you've been cheating on me for months, laughing at me behind my back with your friends, calling me boring and predictable. You didn't just betray me, you humiliated me. There's nothing left to salvage." She stared at me for a long moment, as if searching for something to say that would fix it all. But there was nothing. Finally, she stood up, her jaw tight. "Fine," she said, her voice cold. "If that's what you want, I'll go. But don't think for a second that this is all on me, Alex. You've never understood what I needed." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just watched as she stormed off to the bedroom, the door slamming behind her. Over the next few hours, she packed her things. I stayed in the living room, letting the sound of her movements wash over me like white noise. When she finally left, dragging a suitcase behind her, she didn't say goodbye. She didn't even look at me. The moment the door clicked shut, the weight of it all hit me. I was alone. Truly, utterly alone. The apartment felt cavernous, every corner a reminder of what had been lost. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings and emotional exhaustion. My lawyer was straightforward and professional, walking me through the process with an efficiency I appreciated. I handed over everything I'd collected, the messages, the photos, even her public statements that showed her disregard for me. "This is more than enough," my lawyer said, glancing through the evidence. "The court will see the pattern here. You have a strong case." Hearing that gave me some small sense of vindication, but it didn't erase the pain. Nothing could. Mia, predictably, didn't make the process easy. She tried to argue for a larger share of the assets, claiming her career contributed significantly to our household. But the evidence of her infidelity worked in my favor. My lawyer countered every argument she made, and it quickly became clear she was fighting a losing battle. Throughout it all, I avoided contact with her as much as possible. The few times we did speak, it was through gritted teeth and cold, clipped sentences. There was no apology, no real acknowledgement of what she'd done. If anything, she seemed more concerned about how the divorce would impact her image than the fact that she'd destroyed our marriage. Can we keep this quiet? She asked during one of our rare conversations. I don't want it to affect my brand. I laughed bitterly. Your brand? That's your concern right now? Not the fact that you tore apart our life together? She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic, Alex. People get divorced all the time. Her indifference was staggering, but it only reinforced my decision. This wasn't the woman I fell in love with. That woman was long gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. When the papers arrived, I felt a strange mix of relief and grief. It was over. The chapter of my life that had been defined by Mia, the good, the bad, the heartbreak, was finally closed. The apartment felt emptier than ever in the days that followed. I packed up the remnants of her life, the forgotten hair ties, the half-empty bottles of her favorite perfume, and donated them or threw them away. It was painful but necessary. I threw myself into work, reconnecting with friends I'd drifted away from during my marriage. Slowly I began to rebuild. There were moments when the loneliness threatened to swallow me whole, but I reminded myself that I deserved better. Mia's shadow lingered in my life for a while, especially when I saw her face on billboards or her posts pop up on social media. But I stopped looking. Her life was hers now, just as mine was mine. In the end, I wasn't just letting go of Mia, I was letting go of the version of myself that had been defined by her. And for the first time in years, I felt free.